Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Kavya. Shall we start off?
Yes, sir, we'll start.
Because this is not going to be a very long class.
Mm.
There isn't much. There isn't much one can say about Vemana because first of all, I don't know. I feel like an idiot teaching all these people, and I really feel like an idiot. This should have, for some clarifications, I needed to go to a Telugu teacher. Okay, so I think this should be taught by Telugu teachers, and Kabir should have been taught by a Hindi teacher.
Mm.
I
I think this
really,
time syllabus was made by those teachers, sir.
no. It was made by two fantastic characters in our department. One who's now become the head, and the other who committed suicide uh, after having been caught in a corruption case. So anyway, so they were amazing characters, both of them. They are one was an amazing character. One continues to be an amazing character. But this is not the forum to run people's reputations into the ground. So let's get going. Okay. Now, as has been the case with everybody, including Kabir and all of them, what we find is that there is a shroud of uncertainty over Yogi Vemana. Okay, there's a complete shroud of uncertainty, and one doesn't really know much about him. A lot of it is hearsay. But some of his poems have been translated into English by, again, a philologist and some kind of an endologist. He was not a proper endologist, but he was a bit of an endologist. His name is, he's a Britishman, Englishman rather, and his name is C.P. Brown. So, whatever little we know about him, about Yogi Vemana, that is, that whatever we know uh, certainly about him has come from C.P. Brown's research. The rest are all stories. They are all absolute stories. And now, the title of Yogi to Vemana itself is contentious. Okay, a yogi becomes a yogi by practicing any or all of the several forms of yoga that exist. Okay, I had talked to you about this. We think that yoga is just asanas. It is not that at all. Yoga is something which goes into the domain of thought, of dhyana. Okay, so you have different kinds of yoga: hatha yoga, siddha yoga, jnana yoga. All kinds of yoga are there, and the title Yogi Vemana is perhaps a loose usage of that yogi. Okay, It's like Yogi Adityanath. There's nothing yogi about him, right? If you just shave your head, you don't become a yogi. All right. If that was the case, I would have shaved my head long ago. Uh, so yogi part is something that one has to discount when we are talking about Vemana. Now, his whole birth itself is a bit of a mystery because some people claim that he was born in the 15th century. Other people claim that he was born in the 16th century. And C.P. Brown claims that he was born in the 17th century. Okay, in fact, C.P. Brown is the one uh, who even set a year of his birth, and that he said depended on how he wrote the verses that he wrote, and the relationship of this verses to the general environment in which Vemana lived is what he says uh, can be used uh, in order to arrive at this year of birth as 1652 CE. Okay, so as we go along, you'll find out that people have said he's a Jangama. Uh, he became a Jangama, and look at the chronology of our syllabus. We are doing Vemana first, and the progenitor of the Jangama system is Basaveshwara. Okay, we are doing him later, right? So that is the funny part of this whole thing. But let's not worry too much about that because even that is shrouded in controversy. Now, uh, so let us say he was a 17th century figure because the others are totally unsubstantiated. Okay. Another claim that is made is that he's a Reddy. Okay. If people said he's a Reddy, that would have been all right. But they say that he's from the Reddy caste. Now, what you must understand is that Reddy is not a caste. Okay. Uh, the Kammas are also calling themselves Chaudhurys. They say they are Chaudhary caste. That is also not a caste. Chaudhurys were those who collected the Chauta tax, and the Chauta tax was never imposed in the areas where the Kammas are, which is the Guntur, Vijayawada, Anantapur. Okay, so this was all under the British presidency. There was no Chauta tax here. Most of the Chaudhurys are up north or in Bengal. That's where the Chauta tax was collected. Now, Reddy also came from a tax which was called Rettadi. Okay, Rettadi got over a period of time, it shrunk to just being Reddy. Right now, the technical, what should we say, name for that particular caste would be Palle Kapu. Okay, these people, the Reddys, were those who maintained records of the village, Mali Patel, as it is called in Telangana. and it's basically Palle Kapu in the other uh, side of the divide, which is Rayalaseema and coastal Andhra. So both the Reddys and the Kammas actually are Shudras. And Kapu is a generic name for those who are involved in agriculture, right? Those people who are involved in agriculture. Kapu is one who protects the land. Okay. So that is how this thing came. But if you remember what I told you about M.N. Srinivas's argument, while in the modern caste system, not the Varna system, in the modern caste system, it was not possible to move individually from one caste to another. An entire grouping could move up. Okay, so the Reddys and the Kammas have moved out as entire groupings from the Shudra caste. Okay, and please remember that Shudra is not an untouchable. Okay, if you go by the Varna system, there are four Varnas, Chatur Varna, and there's no untouchable in it. The Panchama Varna became the untouchable that came much, much later thanks to Brahmanical interventions, right? So there's nothing wrong with being a Shudra Kapu anyway. But so these people were those who took care of land and all that kind of thing. So Reddy is not a caste. Now, what makes things even more difficult is that nobody has mentioned the name of Vemana's mother, but those who have mentioned the name of his father say that his name was Gaddam Vema Reddy. Okay. Uh, then they go on to say that Vemana's name was Gona Vema Reddy. Gona, Gona Vema Reddy. Now, that is really funny. Father and son have the same name, Vema Reddy, but they have two different surnames, right? You can have the same surname and two different names, but you can't have father also unless you're American. Then you'll name your son after yourself. Okay, Americans have this wonderful practice. In India, we name people after their grandparents as respect to them. But in America, they're individualist, egoists, so they basically name them their children. Uh, they give them their own name. Okay, so that's why you have 1, 2, 3, and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so this Vema Reddy is also a bit of a confusion. Now, some people say that he was an extremely rich man, a very, very rich man, and he was somebody who was born in Kadapa. Okay, and after he was born in Kadapa, he is supposed to have moved to this village called Katur Palli, which is modern day Kadiri, which is in Rayalaseema. Okay. Uh, his place of birth is recorded as Kadapa. And he lived his initial life there, and he was somebody with loose morals. That is what the story says. I don't know if this is fact or if it's just a story. He was somebody with a completely lose morals. He believed in wining and dining, which is, drinking basically whatever was available in those days. And he was also supposed to be taken in with prostitution. He visited prostitutes very often. And in fact, there is one prostitute who's mentioned. I won't talk about her now because her name is another subject of controversy. So I won't talk about her now, but let us say that he led the life of a debauch, Debauch. A debauch is one who is given to uh, living an immoral life, and living in excesses, indulging in all kinds of excesses. So he is supposed to have been this kind of a person. Now, suddenly people say that there was a king in Kadapa. Now, we don't have any proof of the fact that there was a king in Kadapa at that time. In fact, if you look at the 17th century, that was a time when, most of Kurnool and all these areas right up to Kadapa were under Muslim rulers. But he's supposed to have learned how to make gold, not gold ornaments, mind you. How to make gold is what he's supposed to have learned, and that too under the tutelage of a king. And he used to distribute this gold to uh, women who were prostitutes, especially that one woman whose name I'm deliberately not mentioning now. Okay. Uh, See, so what happened is that the king and a sage got angry with him, and they said, "You are a philanderer, you're wasting gold, distributing it like that." And therefore, they said that the skill that you have of making gold is a skill that you will lose. Okay, you will no longer be able to make gold. And so they said this is the turning point in his life. And when this happened, he left Kadapa, went to Katurupalli, and became this ascetic. Okay, so that picture is supposed to be a fairly accurate description. He even gave up wearing clothes, and this has in itself created a number of different kinds of controversies, which I shall come to in a bit. But uh, he lived in Katurpalli. He didn't live in a home, apparently. He only lived in, what do we say? He lived under a tree, and people would go to him, and he would preach the necessity for a moral life. Having learned his lesson, uh, he dedicated himself to preaching uh, to people as to how they should live a moral life. So this is one of the things that we find again, which is perhaps unsubstantiated. What is definitely unsubstantiated and is wrong is the claim that he belonged to the Reddy caste. He didn't belong to the Reddy caste because there is no caste called Reddy caste. Okay, even if you ask the Reddys today, it's a title. And they say they are Kshatriyas, as do the Kammas who say Chaudhurys and they are Kshatriyas, they say. But that's a different issue altogether, so let's not go in there. Now, people say he became a Jangama. Now, that Jangama is actually somebody who you will uh, look at as a wandering uh, person, and a Jangama is a devotee of Lord Shiva. Okay, and next is what we're supposed to be doing, Basava. I'll talk about that when we're doing Basava, but now I'll just make this one point and leave it there. Uh, Basava advocated the wearing of what he called an Ishtalinga. Okay, the Ishtalinga is nothing but a Shivalinga which is made in the form of a garland of Rudrakshas. Rudraksha tree, those round beads that you get, those Rudrakshas you wear and you carry Shiva with you wherever you go. And this concept is called the concept of Ishtalinga by Basava. And Jangamas originally used to do this, but after that, when the Jangama thing saw that there is a thing, the development of the Lingayat, especially in the border areas of Telangana and Karnataka, the Lingayats started wearing a linga on the sacred thread. Okay, so you see neither a Lingayat, because he didn't wear a sacred thread, nor did he wear the Ishtalinga. And if he was a Jangama, he doesn't mention Shiva anywhere in his writings or in his speech. There's no mention of Shiva. Okay, so therefore, this seems to be uh, a wrong bit of information, that he became a Jangama, he took on the Jangama caste. So that seems to be a wrong information. Now, some people claim that Vemana was a yogi in the Achala Siddhanta sect. Okay, like I said, there are various kinds of yogic sects, and one of them is this Achala Siddhanta sect. Achala is, that which doesn't move in Sanskrit. So that actually goes against the Jangama theory. So that contradicts the Jangama theory, because a Jangama is supposed to keep moving. And if he was a yogi in the Achala Siddhanta sect, then that is a contradiction in terms, something that we have to be aware of. So maybe one can accept that he was a part of the Achala Siddhanta sect. But his writings came to the fore thanks to C.P. Brown, whom I have talked to you about. C.P. Brown basically collected all his available works and translated them and published them in the 19th century. C.P. Brown was also somebody who knew very good Telugu. He was an excellent Telugu speaker. He wrote, in spite of being an Englishman, he wrote very well in Telugu. Okay, so you will see that he is a bit like Jack Higgins. I don't know if you've heard of him. Jack Higgins is a Carnatic singer, and he's also an Englishman. And he's a Carnatic singer, and he sings Carnatic music flawlessly. Okay, so C.P. Brown was one of those kind of people who knew the Telugu language very well. And so he first got all these things published in Telugu after he collected them. Collected them from where, we don't know. And he also later translated them into English. Now, one of the striking features of Vemana's writing is his use of very, very simple, straightforward Telugu. Okay, he did not write anything which was complicated. Okay, he never wrote anything which was complicated. It was very simple so that everybody could understand. He kept it like that. He didn't want to complicate things. If you complicated things, then people don't understand. So the themes of his poems, which are usually four-liners, okay, it is the first two lines that change, and the second two lines are the ones that are constant. Uh, so the themes of these poems that he wrote are mainly moral. Okay, he emphasizes morality. In a way, they are also a bit mystical. Mystical in the sense that you know what is mysticism. Mysticism is esoteric references to God that not everybody understands. But C.P. Brown says that these mystical poems are very few in number. He says they are very, very few in number. And then they are also social commentaries. They are also something which have to do with social reforms. And he basically also used satire. Making a satirical thing is using something to make fun of somebody. Some of his, not all of his, poems are what we say satirical, or they are in the form of satire. So I remember two things from my school days. I think this one, which I'm going to tell you now, qualifies to be called satirical. Okay. He wrote this Tappulennuvaru Tandopatandambulu. Okay. Tappulennuvaru Tandopatandambulu Urvi Janulakella Nundu Tappu. తప్పులెన్నువారు తమ తప్పులెరుగరయ విశ్వదాభిరామ వినురవేమ. Okay, so I think it's actually 5 lines, not 4 lines. I don't know. Anyway, so the meaning is, the first is clear. తప్పులెన్నువారు తండోపతండంబులు, which means everybody is trying to find fault with others. Okay. Then the second line is the slightly complicated one, where he uses this urvi janulu. Urvi janulakella nundu tappu. Urvi is earth. Okay, so anybody who's living on the earth will make mistakes. తప్పులెన్నువారు తమ తప్పులెరుగరయా. So that's the satirical part. Those who point out the mistakes of others don't know their own mistakes, considering the fact that everybody makes mistakes. Okay, so he says this is an instance of satire. Vishwadhabhirama Vinuravema. All his poems end with this. Okay, now there's another one which is a moral instruction. ఉప్పు కప్పు రంబు నొక్క పోలిక నుండు చూడ చూడ రుచుల జాడ వేరు పురుషులందు పుణ్య పురుషులు వేరయా విశ్వదాభిరామ వినురవేమ. This is easy. Uppu is salt, kappurambu is karpura, camphor. If you powder it, it looks like salt. They look alike, but they are not alike. So similarly, what he's saying is that you have to look at this whole idea of, in the set of people with whom you are moving around, there are some people who are greater than others. They lead a better moral life. So that's why Uppu Kappurambu Nokka Polika Nundu Chuda Chuda Ruchuda Jada Veru Purushulandu Punya Purushulu Veraya Vishwadabhirama Vinuravema. Now this brings me to this Mukutam, as it is called. This Vishwadabhirama Vinuravema. I was told that the prostitute that he went to, her name was Vishwada, and he had a close friend whose name was Abhirama. Okay, so he chose to include these two people in his poetry, and Vishwadabhirama Vinuravema is listen to Vemana, who was Vema. But why should he invoke a prostitute and an arbitrary friend? So the correct interpretation apparently is that Vishwadabhirama is to be understood as Rama, the beloved God of the world. That is how it has to be understood. Okay, Rama as the beloved God of the world. That is why Vishwadabhirama, he says, I have surrendered to Rama. Whatever jnana I have is what I have got from surrendering to Rama, and that jnana I am giving to you now, that knowledge I am passing on to you now. So Vinura Vema, that is the correct translation of the Mukutam. Mukutam is that which sits on top of the cap-like thing. Okay, so this Vishwada is not a prostitute. Please, if you read that anywhere, just drop it like a bomb. Now, people say that he wrote about 7,000 poems, but he's known only for the Vemana Shatakam, which is 100 poems. And Brown has found only 100 poems. Apart from Vemana, another person who wrote a Shatakam was Sumati. That's called Sumati Shatakam, right? So I don't know why he was not included in the syllabus. Anyway, his poems, if you look, they are supposed to follow a meter. metering, which is called the Ata Veladi. Ata Veladi is a dancing woman, which is, there is a lilt to his poems. They are done with they are not prosaic, they are not boring. They are nice on your ears. It's like, you know, the words are going up and down. So that particular metering is called Ata Veladi. Okay. Uh, I told you once he went to Katurupalli, he became a nudist, and people came to him apparently when he sat under a tree. He had no home, he had no ashram, also worth talking about, nothing at all. Now, because of the fact that he became a Digambara, the Jains started claiming that he was a Jain. Okay. And the fact that from Mehboob Nagar, okay, up to Kadapa, people have excavated and found a lot of Jain and Buddhist relics. Okay, if you go to this Pillalamarri, that huge banyan tree, which has unfortunately been cut and spoiled, you will find all these Buddhist and Jain relics museum there. That's near Mehboob Nagar. Okay, now, so what you need to understand is that this claims that he was a Jainist, he was a Buddhist, all these things are bogus claims. If he sat naked, I don't know why he sat naked. Some people say he became a Jain Arahat. Some people say he became a Buddhist Arahat. I'm not going to discuss what that Arahat is. Arhat is one who has gained great knowledge. That is enough to become a Tirthankara for the Jains. For the Mahayana Buddhists, that's good enough to become a Bodhisattva. But for the Theravada Buddhists, it's not good enough to become a Bodhisattva. Okay, so they, I don't think he's either Jain or he's a Buddhist. There's nothing. He's talking only about Rama, who is his beloved God. Okay. Now, in all this, if you find time, do an internet search and read Jaggi Vasudev, who's a fraud, who calls himself, uh, what does he call himself? Sadguru. Even Sadguru has, told his own version of the story of Vemana, which I found hilarious, but I'm not going to share that with you. This is it as far as Vemana is basically concerned. If there are 7,000 poems we don't know, we know only Shatakam. Shatakam is 100 poems. That is the only thing that we can be confident of.